What's got 4 wheels, an origin story to rival that of Frankenstein's monster, and more nasty nicknames than a bullied schoolboy? The BMW Z3 M Coupe. Here's a fairly detailed history of it. The BMW Z3 M Coupe is undeniably unique, but it's a car that you can't help but be surprised that it was ever actually produced. You see, unlike most sports cars, which are produced with romantic notions and dreams of greatness, the Z3 M Coupe was born out of disappointment. The disappointment of the Z3 Roadster. BMW themselves weren't dissatisfied with the Z3 Roadster. After a successful marketing campaign that included featuring the car in the 1995 film James Bond GoldenEye, orders for the car were sky high. The issue was that whilst the folks in charge of the company's finances were very happy with the car, the engineers who actually made the Z3 weren't. They just felt it wasn't good enough. Whilst handsome in its aesthetics, the topless design made for a soft and twisty chassis that offered somewhat vague and lifeless handling around the corners. It's the fundamental downfall of roadsters. When you remove the roof, you remove a large amount of structural rigidity and stiffness, without which the chassis flexes and twisted when the car hits a bump or is thrown into a bend. This bothered the hell out of Burkhard Goschel, who was the head of development on the Z3 Roadster project. He had worked his way up through the ranks at BMW, and along his way had developed the company's first production V12 engine and transformed the BMW motorcycle division into a favourable and profitable part of the company. But Burkhard Goschel is also a racer, so whilst the Z3 was yet another triumph in the eyes of the accountants, he couldn't help but feel he had unfinished business with it. He needed to make the car truly good to drive. So he assembled a task force and recruited 4 engineers from BMW's M division who also felt that the car could be better. This team of 5 worked on the project in secret. They had to, they were fixing a car that, to everyone else, wasn't broken. So the team took an early Z3 prototype down into the underground garage beneath the BMW Research and Development Centre, and on the weekend and after hours worked on improving the car, away from judgmental eyes and angry bosses. The Z3 M Coupe's design and development process was far from the norm at BMW. There were no 3D computer mock-ups, no detailed designs on paper even. They figured it out as they went along, hacking the car apart and then building it into something new using wood, foam plastic and foil. For a long while, this team of 5 engineers kept the project so secret they didn't even bring in a designer from the style department to help shape the car. So the Z3 Coupe is probably a car that takes form following function more literally than any other. Oh, and when they did get someone to help style the car, they recruited a single member of the style department to work with them. Again, in secret, of course. The secret was only shared when the team had completed producing a full-scale clay model of the coupe. It was at this point that Dr. Goschel and his team presented the car to the Chief of Research and Development at BMW, Wolfgang Ritzel, as well as the rest of the company board. The car split opinions through the board. Some loved it, others loathed it, and as Dr. Goschel says, there was nothing in between. It's not surprising that the design of the Z3 M Coupe is so polarising to those who see it. It's very much a car of 2 halves. From the windshield forward, it's the Z3 we all recognise. The handsome design penned by Joji Nakashima was retained in order to minimise the amount of panels that need to be designed for the car, as the budget for the M Coupe was tight. In fact, as much of the Z3 Roadster as possible was transferred into the M Coupe, such as, aside from a few minor changes, the entirety of the interior. This heralded no complaints though, as the Z3 had a lovely level-lined cabin. On the outside of the car, from the windshield backwards though, the design was near enough all new, and highly controversial. When looking at the M Coupe from the front, one thing is very apparent. It's wider than the standard car. The flared wheel arches widen the M car by about 48mm. And whilst that doesn't sound like much, visually it's significant. It gives the car a much more aggressive pose, forecasting a driving experience that's assailing on the senses, and much like, well, all the visual alterations in the Z3 M Coupe, The wheel arches aren't there just to add aesthetic interest. They're as a result of form following function. The enlarged arches cover extra wide 17-inch wheels on widened tracks for increased grip and stability. The car also sat around 28mm lower than the standard Z3 Roadster as a result of a stiffer suspension setup. And the more aggressive front bumper on the car with the fog lights removed is there as a result of air ducts being needed to aid the cooling of the mighty 12.4-inch brake discs that were transplanted directly from the M3. But the biggest aesthetic change to the car's form was also as a result of the quest for improved function. Quick question, how do you add torsional rigidity to a roofless car? Well, according to Dr. Goschel, by welding a roof to it. This sounds comical and somewhat lazy, but it actually has a history of working really well. The engineering team followed in the footsteps of cars such as the MGB GT and the Triumph GT6, both of which were initially designed as roadsters and later converted into coupes. It's also very likely the team took notes from BMW's own back catalogue of creations, in particular the Z3 Coupe. If you haven't heard of it, it's understandable. The Z3 Coupe was a concept produced in the late 1980s after the world had gone loopy over the Z1 Roadster and its sliding doors. The coupe never went into production, quite understandably in my opinion, as those sliding doors combined with a fixed roof makes for a keyhole-sized entry point that only gymnasts could really make use of. But the concept still proved useful, because it stood as undeniable inspiration for the Z3 Coupe. The proportions along the length of the two cars seems to match almost perfectly, and both feature a shooting brake rear design. The term shooting brake has nothing to do with the car's brakes, but it does refer to shooting. The name was coined around 130 years ago, back when horse-drawn carriages were still the main way of getting around. There was a specific type of carriage used to train horses how to do the job of pulling the vehicle, and this was called a brake, named as it was used to brake in the horses. The shooting half of the name comes from carriages that were extended at the back in order to accommodate large shooting parties and their guns, dogs, and on good days, recently acquired meat. So in essence, shooting brake means able to hold more stuff. But being able to take twice the amount of shopping was of course just a byproduct of the Z3 M Coupe's roof. It was put there to increase rigidity, and my oh my, it certainly succeeded. The M Coupe's chassis was 2.6 times stiffer than the Roadster, and even over a third stiffer than the E36 M3 Coupe. This roof, combined with thicker anti-roll bars, a reinforced subframe, a limited slip differential, and much improved semi-trailing arms on the rear suspension system, transformed the way the car handled. Gone was any inkling of vagueness and disconnect to the road, and in its place was an invigorating and engaging driving experience that begged the pilot to find a limit, and admittedly sometimes bit back hard if that limit was overstepped. And overstepping that limit was very possible, as pre-2001 cars didn't have traction control or any form of stability control. They were old school, scary, and powerful. Powerful because Burkhard Goschel and his team decided that an M car deserved an M engine. So back into the frame once more comes the M3 donor car, and this time the engineers grabbed its 321 brake horsepower, straight 6, S50 motor and crammed it into the Z3's engine bay. Well, I say crammed, it was really quite a comfortable fit. The Z3 actually had enough space under the bonnet to fit a V12 engine. We know this because BMW did it in 1999 when they built a one-off concept. But that's a story for a different time. Whilst the V12 car never made it to the market, Z3 M fans in Europe can't complain, as those in America didn't even get to enjoy the 321 brake horsepower car. This is especially unfair when we consider that the M Coupe, like all Z3 models, were manufactured in the USA. So whilst the European market got to enjoy all that horsepower, plus 251 pound-feet of torque, the US domestic market had to make do with just 240 brake horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque. Things did get better for the US market in 2001 when the Z3 M Coupe was updated. This update included a new 6-cylinder engine that gave the American market cars 315 brake horsepower and 252 pound-feet of torque. This was only 10 horsepower and 6 pound-feet of torque less than the European market spec engine. This power was sent through a snappy 5-speed manual gearbox that was also taken from an M3. But all these new components did come with a compromise, as the sizable engine in front, plus a metal roof bolted to the top of the car, as well as a whole load of reinforced parts to increase stiffness, did add weight. The car's not portly by any means, but its curb weight of 1,383 kilograms is not particularly impressive either. But what is impressive is how well this weight is disguised. The car's 50-50 weight distribution helps it greatly around the corners, and along the straights the Z3 M Coupe is grin-inducingly quick. The pre-2001 Euro spec car runs to 60 miles an hour in less than 5 seconds, even though BMW only claimed the car could complete this run in 5.7 seconds, and it can also cover the quarter mile in 13.2 seconds, and will accelerate all the way to an electronically limited 155 miles an hour. Usually when I speak of a car's 0 to 60, quarter mile and top speed times in these history videos, I compare them to those of rival cars. You know, similar cars from the era that you would have also test driven should you have been in the market at the time. But in my opinion, the Z3 M Coupe didn't really have any rivals. There's nothing similar to it. The Porsche 996 Carrera cost in excess of £20,000 more than the M Coupe, as did the Honda NSX, and a coupe such as the Audi TT 1.8 Turbo was around £10,000 less than the BMW, and with 100 less horsepower and almost 100 kilograms of extra weight. It wasn't even close to rivaling the performance or experience of the coupe. In fact, if you wanted a truly bonkers rear-wheel drive 2-seater coupe for around £35,000 to £40,000 in the late 90s, your choice was between this, possibly the famously unreliable TVR Zebra, or the Chevrolet Corvette. Rival cars just weren't about at the time because the large European manufacturers thought that there wasn't a market for these cars anymore. After all, the Z3 M Coupe was essentially a muscle car. BMW's board of directors only finally agreed to sell the car after their European sales chief convinced them that the Z3 Coupe was never going to make sense to the brain, but it would win over the public's hearts. And he was right, it did both of those things. When the car was unveiled at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1997, as was to be expected, half of those that saw the car hated it. It just didn't make sense to them, and its looks earned it some fairly derogatory nicknames, such as the clown shoe, the hearse, and the bread van. However, those who got to drive the car were quickly won over, and reviewers praised the Z3 M Coupe as a true driver's car and a viable option to those folks who are on the lookout for something visceral and exciting. But £36,000 is a lot of money, and when you're considering parting with that amount of hard-earned cash, you can't just follow your heart. Potential buyers listen to their brains as well, and as a result, the Z3 M Coupe sold in small numbers. Between April of 1998 and when production ended in May of 2002, BMW sold a total of just 6,291 Z3 M Coupes. Comparatively, they sold over 15,000 Z3 M Roadsters throughout its production run, and in excess of 279,000 Z3 Roadsters in total. It's worth quickly noting at this point that BMW also produced non-M Division Z3 Coupes for certain markets, which had either a 2.8 or 3 litre engine and could be spec'd with an automatic gearbox. They sold over 11,500 of these less performance focused examples, so better but still not loads. Apparently these lack of sales are a contributing factor as to why the coupe cars didn't receive any major cosmetic changes when the Z3 Roadsters underwent their facelift in 1999. BMW still had loads of pre-facelift coupe bodies waiting to be sold and assembled in the factory, so rather than waste all these shells, they just carried on with the old shape for cost effectiveness. I presume their thinking was those who bought the Z3 M Coupe weren't particularly bothered about the car's aesthetics anyway. Of course, it is also worth remembering that the Coupe had only been on sale for a year in 1999, so it wasn't really in need of a visual update at this point either. Whilst the small production numbers may have stunted any chance of a visual update for the Z3 M Coupe, it has certainly helped boost their value on the used car market. The car has been climbing rapidly in value in recent years, and today, for an example with fewer than 50,000 miles, you won't be getting much, if any change out of £40,000. If you are currently on the lookout for a Z3 M Coupe, make sure you check under the boot carpet as the boot floor can crack and tear around the rear differential mounting. And keep an eye out for rust. That's obvious for all cars, of course, but as the Z3 M Coupe body is actually known to be pretty corrosion resistant, rust patches can be an indication of poorly repaired crash damage. In fact, even though it was designed and developed in a car park, the Z3 M Coupe is considered to be a really well built car. Therefore, there aren't many unusual mechanical woes to really keep an eye out for. Something else potential buyers won't have to worry about is whether to opt for a special edition M Coupe or not, because BMW didn't make any. They did make a couple of one-offs, such as a unique Z3 M Coupe for the winner of a competition in Germany's leading car magazine, Auto Motorsport, and apparently a Z3 M Coupe safety car for MotoGP that produced over 522 horsepower, but nothing us mere mortals could get our hands on. This is somewhat peculiar, as by the time production on the Z3 range ended in order to make way for the upcoming Z4, BMW had produced several special, or as they called them, individual editions for the Roadster, presumably in an attempt to keep the market interested in the car and to keep people coming to the showrooms. Yet, I'm actually glad that the BMW Z3 M Coupe didn't receive the special edition treatment in order to try and drum up sales. It would have been a mistake, as without doubt a car that was designed in secret in an underground garage, formed and born through sheer determination, a car that doesn't care how it looks or that it's comprised of borrowed parts that work together to produce drama and nostalgia and ferocity. A car that proved to the world that BMW wasn't getting boring. A car like that doesn't need a special edition, bringing with it an extra badge and some contrast stitching. No, that car, it's special enough. So that was a fairly detailed history of the BMW Z3 M Coupe. I hope you enjoyed it and feel slightly more informed than you did 20 minutes ago. Thanks. Hi, it's me again. If you've come this far, maybe you'd be willing to go a little further, and like and subscribe please. Oh, and if you can, let me know what you think of these videos in the comments. What you like and maybe don't like so much, so I can learn to make the best videos possible. Thanks again.